Greetings, my friends. Again, Rabbi Jamie here. Thank you again for the opportunity to worship with you. And Pastor Martin was kind enough to invite me to share a few words about our shared sacred scripture from the book of Isaiah, chapter 46. This context for the verses that I will read and comment on, Isaiah warning that this swooping bird of prey will come from the east, a distant land, to fulfill this divine desire to bring Israel to its knees and to teach it a lesson. So 2,600 years ago, that swooping bird of prey was the army of Babylon. And today we have another sort of bird of prey sweeping in from the east. Right, this global pandemic caused by this new coronavirus is also laying siege to our sanctuaries, confining us to our homes and putting masks over our faces when we go out. So how do we respond, and how do we seek and find deliverance or rescue from this situation, from this pandemic, from this swooping bird of prey in our own time? Well, perhaps these 10th and 11th verses offer us some direction. Hearken unto me, you stubborn of heart, you who are far from tzedakah, which is often translated as deliverance. I am bringing my tzedakah close. It is not far off. I am bringing my deliverance close. It is not far off. And my teshuah, my salvation, shall not be delayed, shall not tarry. I will grant teshuah in Zion for Israel, my tiferet. I will grant salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory. So as you heard, I introduced a few Hebrew words there, three in particular: tzedakah, teshuah, and tiferet. And tzedakah is the Hebrew word here translated as deliverance. Sometimes it's translated as triumph. And teshuah, the second one, translated as salvation. And the third one, tiferet, here translated as glory. But I want to offer some alternative readings of these three words that may be instructive for our time. The Hebrew word tzedakah comes from the word tzedek, which means justice and fairness. So if you read the phrase that way, I am bringing, you who are far from justice, I am bringing my justice close. It is not far off. It changes the verse almost completely. And then the second line that I read, and my teshuah shall not be delayed. Teshuah, often translated as salvation, can also be understood as help and timely aid. And the help that you need is coming. Right? The help will not be delayed, will not tarry. And lastly, I will grant teshuah in Zion for Israel, my tiferet. I will grant help in the right time, the right kind of help at the right time, in Zion for Israel, my tiferet. So what does it mean, Israel, my tiferet? So glory, the sign of the majesty of God? That doesn't work so well in this context when Israel is not looking its best, right? When God is bringing an army from the east to lay siege to Jerusalem. Israel is not looking great. So what else could Tiferet mean? Well, in the rabbinic understanding, Tiferet is a combination of two ideas: beauty and compassion. Beauty wedded to compassion, or which derives from compassion. I will grant my help in Zion for Israel when they understand compassion. From compassion grows beauty. Tiferet comes from, we will recognize Tiferet, the glory of Israel, when we experience and when we know the suffering of another. Perhaps that is why an army has come to lay waste to Jerusalem and to to put Israel literally in its place, well, out of its place, into exile, an exile that would last centuries, and then a subsequent exile that would last millennia. Compassion. True compassion is not born of righteousness nor acceptance. It's born of humility. And humility is the quality par excellence exhibited by Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, as we call him. I want to share a short story from the book of Numbers about Moses and how he exemplified and was named as an exemplar of humility, as a source of compassion, as a symbol and a recognition of compassion, and that the compassion would lead to the glory of Israel. So Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only with Moses? Has God not spoken with us as well?" And God heard it. Now, the man Moses was very humble, more so than any human on the face of the earth, any Adam on the face of the Adamah, the earth. So this is an interesting passage, these 3 verses, for many reasons. One, Cush, a Cushite woman. Cush is Ethiopia. So according to this passage, Moses married a woman from Ethiopia, clearly of dark skin, or perhaps slightly darker than Moses. And he's criticized perhaps for marrying her by his brother and his sister, Moses and Miriam. But they offer another criticism here that, wait, hasn't God spoken to us as well? And instead of coming back with a sharp argument, with a witty retort, Moses doesn't say anything, and it says of him that he was very humble, the most anav, humble of any person on earth. Famous rabbinic commentator from the 11th century, Rashi, notes that what an anav is, what a humble person is one who can set their pride aside, let their pride fall, and be a savlan. A savlan. Savlan is where we get the word for perseverance and patience, forbearance, being able to bear a burden. He was willing to bear the suffering, right? His own hurt pride for the sake of a higher purpose. So instead, God responds and rebukes Moses or Miriam and Aaron, this represents Moses representing the sign of humility, of being able to control manage one's own discomfort, bear one's own burden, the burden of insult in this case, and insult to him and to his wife, and let God respond. That this is a sign of a practice of humility. What else can we learn about humility from the Torah, from the Bible? We are also taught that Abraham was a humble man, and it said because he set aside a place for prayer. That's kind of confounding in a way. Why is it so humble to set aside a place for yourself to go to pray? And one explanation is that when you set aside a place for you to pray, you implicitly invite another to create a space, to hold a space for their prayer. That by you taking up your proper amount of space, and not too much, but also not too little, you're inviting, encouraging your peer, your neighbor, to likewise take up an amount of space appropriate to them. So the third sign of humility is the readiness to respond. The Hebrew word for a humble person, an anav, also spells the word they will respond, anu. They will not stand idly by the blood of their neighbor, and when called to serve the causes of justice, they say, "Here I am," or in Hebrew, "Hineni." So these are the three qualities of humility I wanted to highlight today from Moses: the ability to bear one's own insult and still be present, Abraham's ability to set aside a space for prayer, and third, the capacity to respond when called upon. You need my help? Hineni, here I am. My help is coming. During a time of mandatory social distancing, you want to bring our communities together? You said, Hineni, here I am. You want to sing and pray with a bunch of white Jews from the mountains? Hineni, you said, here I am, you said. You want to bridge the gap between our sacred faiths? Hineni, here I am. You want to bridge the cultural gap, the color gap, the prejudicial gaps? Hineni, here we are. And you want to bridge the gap between the injustices of the current reality and work together to fulfill the prophetic promise of liberty and justice for all? Yes, we say, here we are, Hineni. Like Abraham, Jacob, and Moses, and you, I too stand here, ready in body and mind to stand with you to respond to that call. Hineni, here I am.